Hello guys, welcome to trigonometry. I'm going to be doing trigonometry for grade 12. In this topic, I will be looking at trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. Let me write that one down. We are going to look at trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. Trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. So this question that I'm looking at is November 2013, and the question was saying determine the value of each of the following trig ratio without using a calculator. 10.1, they wanted you to determine cos alpha. So I'm going to determine cos alpha with you guys. I'm going to answer the question of November 2013. I'm reading the question again. Determine the value of the following trig ratio without using a calculator. Most important, this is so important. They want you to determine a trig ratio. Actually, they want you to determine the value of a trig ratio. They want you to determine the value of a trig ratio. The question itself is so important. Why am I saying it's so important? It guides you that you must have understanding of trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. The question itself is a guideline that the trigonometry I'm going to use is the trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. I'm saying that again. When they say determine the value of a trig ratio, determine the value of trigonometric ratio. This happens in trigonometry where we are looking at trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. Trigonometry on a Cartesian plane, mostly you will see y-axis and x-axis. This is a Cartesian plane. It's a trigonometry that deals with a Cartesian plane. Now, this type of trigonometry, all the time, if it's a trigonometry on a Cartesian plane, take this advice of mine. Determine, my first step, determine x, y, and r. Once you realize that I'm dealing with trigonometry on a Cartesian plane, you have to determine the value of x, y, and r. Come on. It seems funny or somehow, because the question says we want the value of cos alpha, but I'm busy working the value of x, y, and r. Is because to find cos alpha, the value of x, y, and r, they are very, very important. Normally x, y, and r, normally the value of x, y, sorry for that guys. Normally the value of x, y, and r, if we write them together in a single equation, normally they are found in this maths equation. X squared plus y squared equals to r squared. The first thing, we are going to determine x, y, and r. But if we try to bring this x, y, and r together in a single equation, we find them on equation which is called the theorem of Pythagoras. X squared plus y squared equals to r squared. And one more other thing, in this trigonometry of a Cartesian plane, you have to know that this variable x that we have to find represent the adjacent, and this variable y that we have to find represent opposite, and the variable r that we have to find represent the hypotenuse. So it's another important concept that you have to understand. I'm saying, let me simplify. I'm saying in trigonometry of a Cartesian plane, it's important to determine x, y, and r, and this x represent the adjacent side. This y represent the opposite side, and this r represent the hypotenuse side. These sides, they are normally found in what we call a right angle triangle, where we can say, let me say A, B, where we can say AB is the hypotenuse, CB is the adjacent, AC is the opposite. So I'm saying the hypotenuse represent R, the adjacent represent X, the opposite represent Y. So let's go and find X, Y, and R. How do we find them? They are on your Cartesian plane. Let's go to the Cartesian plane and see if we can get this X, Y, and R. On our Cartesian plane, we have on P coordinates, we have -5 and -12. Do you still remember mathematically that the first coordinate represents X? So therefore, we can say the value of X is -5, the value of Y is -12. They are there on the Cartesian plane. X is -5, Y is -12. So what we are going to do, we don't have R. Ne? What we are going to do, we are going to solve for R. Using the equation that I told you about, which is called the theorem of Pythagoras. X squared plus Y squared equals to R squared. The value of X was -5. So -5 squared, the value of Y was -12. -12 squared equals to R squared. 25 plus 144 equals to R squared. 25 plus 144 is 169. 169 equals to R squared. You still remember how to remove exponent 2? By putting the square root both sides. The square root of R squared equals to the square root of 169 plus or minus. 2 cancel the square root. The square root of 169 is 13. So 13 equals to R. Plus or minus 13, but R is always positive. So R equals to 13. So we did found, sorry for the noise that you have just heard, guys. It's very impossible that you might not hear sometimes noise outside, because I'm working, I'm in my family yard, so outside you'll just hear voices. You'll forgive us for that, but just focus on the maths that we are doing. We now have X, it's -5. We have Y, it's -12. We solved R is 13. You will see how easy it is to answer the question if you have X, Y, and R. So my advice is that when you are dealing with trigonometry on a Cartesian plane, solve X, Y, and R. For example, let's go to cos alpha. Let's look for the answer of cos alpha, because if you look at the question, they say determine the value of the following ratio. They want you to answer cos alpha. So I'm answering cos alpha. Cos alpha equals to, I'm answering that. But now, another important part, let me just consider step number 2. Step number 1 was to solve X, Y, and R. I said it here. Step number 2, let me call it answering the trig ratios. Step number 2, we have to use what we call SOHCAHTOA. We have to use SOHCAHTOA. So what is this S for? S stands for sine theta. Sine of an angle is, O is for opposite, is opposite over, H is hypotenuse. So sine of an angle is opposite over hypotenuse. What about cos of an angle? Like cos alpha. Cos of an angle is, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cos is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. Do you still remember we said adjacent represent what? I said x represent adjacent. So because cos alpha is adjacent over hypotenuse, it's x over r. I said hypotenuse, r represent hypotenuse. So the value of x is, sorry guys, the value of x is -5. The value of r is 13. Therefore, cos alpha is -5 over 13. Because cos alpha, cos of an angle, is adjacent over hypotenuse. What the important part is SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA tells you that cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. Let's answer the second question. The second question was saying tan 180 minus alpha. Tan 180 minus alpha. This is the concept of reduction formula. And if you use the reduction formula to solve tan 180 minus alpha. Okay. In reduction formula, let me not rush. Let me talk about the concept of reduction formula, because to answer the question of tan 180 minus alpha, we have to understand the concept of reduction formula. The reduction formula, it will be something like this. When you see sine 90 plus alpha, or let me draw something like this. Let me say 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. So if the first value is any of the following, it's 90, 180, 270, and 360 inside the bracket, like this one, tan, the first one inside the bracket is 180. You can see we do have 180 on this diagram that I have drawn. So this is a guideline that you have to use a reduction formula. Even on this one, it's sine 90. 90, it's here. Anything, any trig expression that has 90, 180, 270, and 360, we will use a reduction formula. Let's say it's sine of 270 minus theta. By this 270, we do have 270 on this diagram of mine, so we use a reduction formula. When we have 90, 180, 270, and 360, we use reduction formula. So in this case, we had tan of 180 minus alpha. So we are going to use reduction formula because the first value inside the bracket is 180. And then guys, when you use a reduction formula, just cancel the first number. You're going to be left with tan alpha. Now you have to determine if the answer is it positive or is it negative. But the first part is very simple. Let me try to explain it so you understand it. This is tan of 180 minus alpha. I'm saying just cancel this 180. You will be left with tan of alpha. But now what you have to be careful of again is the sign of this tan alpha. Is the sign positive or is it negative? Let me fetch my calculator. I'm going to use Casio to determine the sign. I'm going to use Casio to determine the sign. Sorry, let me try to use Casio to determine the sign. It was tan of 180 minus alpha. Hopefully, let me say tan, let me say 180. It was minus alpha, right? So I'm going to say minus any angle less than 90. I can say minus 13. Tan 180 minus 13. The answer is it's equals to, the answer is negative 0.23. Because it's negative, you can see that tan of 180 minus alpha, it's negative. So the answer is gonna be negative tan alpha. So this is negative tan alpha. Now because it's negative tan alpha, you can say negative. Now you use you use the definition of tan alpha. Tan is opposite over adjacent. Remember, you have to use so, ka, tua, t for tan. Tan is opposite over adjacent. And I said opposite represent y. Always opposite represent y. And what was the value of y? The value of y is minus 12. So it's gonna be negative 12 over adjacent is minus 5. X is adjacent represent x. So the answer is minus 12 over 5. So the answer is negative 12 over 5. Not that visible, but is the answer of tan 180 minus alpha. Hopefully, guys, you understood this concept of trigonometry. Okay, guys, we are still continuing with trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. And I said, when you are doing trigonometry on a Cartesian plane, you must have the value of x. We found it's minus 5. We must have the value of y. We saw it's minus 12. We must have the value of r. We saw that r is 13. We saw that the value of r is 13. Now, the last question was saying determine tan 180 minus alpha. For in case if you did not understand this one, I'm going to explain it once more for the last time. I'm saying once our value start with 180 or any of this 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. If the value start with any of this 90, 180, 270 and 360, it means that we must use the reduction formula. And if we are using reduction formula, we just cancel out 180. We're gonna be left with tan alpha. Forget about this negative. Just say tan alpha. Now we have to determine the sign, whether it's positive or negative. Press tan 180 minus alpha on calculator, but where it's alpha, put any angle less than 90. You can put any angle less than 90. You can say tan 180 minus 10. You press it on calculator, you'll see that the answer is negative. So tan 180 minus alpha is going to be negative tan alpha. Then you apply the definition of tan. Tan, according to Sokatua, tan is opposite, O is for opposite, over adjacent. So tan of theta is opposite over adjacent. Opposite represent y, adjacent represent x. Y it's minus 12, and then x is minus 5. Let's say, guys, let me not rush. Let me say, guys, you had something like sine of 360 minus alpha. Okay, guys, I will teach the topic of reduction formula separately. Let me just focus on the trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. I will teach it separate. For now, I've answered cos alpha, and I have answered tan 180 minus alpha. So hopefully, guys, you understood that. We are going to look at another question. I'm going to look for another question of trigonometry on a Cartesian plane. We treat it.